Hey, I'm Sarah, and this is the Goddess in Training podcast. This isn't about being perfect or polished or having it all figured out. This is about what happens when you actually start listening to your body, your intuition, your patterns, your truth. I'm asking big questions and having real conversations, sometimes messy and sometimes magical, with people who've lived through it, grown through it, and still don't have all the answers. If you've ever doubted yourself, betrayed your gut, or wondered if you're the only one, you're not. Let's talk about it. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Goddess in Training, a podcast about the art and practice of intuitive living. Today's episode is for anyone who's ever stood at a crossroads in their career feeling the pull of something they couldn't quite name, or who's been in a job interview wondering, is this a yes from my gut or just my nerves talking? I'm so excited to share this conversation with Deborah Collins, a dear friend and someone I had the pleasure of working with during a time of big transition. Deborah is the founder and CEO of her own consulting and recruiting business and a respected leader in the nonprofit sector. She brings over 2 decades of experience supporting institutions like the Whitney Museum, the Ford Foundation, and the Michael J. Fox Foundation, helping organizations recalibrate during times of deep change. She also happens to be a ski instructor, which means she understands in a very embodied way what it means to navigate terrain that's always shifting, whether that's on the mountain or inside an organization. In this conversation, we talk about the role of intuition in job seeking, how to tell the difference between fear and inner knowing, and what it means to show up as your whole self in the workplace, and how to hold steady when everything around you is moving. This is a grounded, insightful episode with hard-earned wisdom and big-hearted clarity. Let's dive in. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us today on Goddess in Training podcast. Just to give a little bit of context for our listeners, Deborah and I met probably almost a year ago when Deborah was hired to be an interim COO for the organization I was working for. And we struck up a friendship and had this one really fun night in particular where we sat drinking Vespas. I had never heard of a Vespa before with a board member and telling stories, and it was fun and kind of profound in the sense that this person that we were talking to just so appreciated the conversation because Deborah and I both were ourselves and brought a sense of authenticity that he said he didn't experience in his day-to-day life. And so it was just kind of a night full of intuition and stories. And so I'm excited to talk with you some more in that vein. So Deborah, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Do you remember that night? And did you have any specific takeaways from that?
Yeah, I think the word authenticity sprang to mind. It was just spontaneous and a really nice way of getting to know you and also getting to know other people in a sort of an informal setting. And I think those kinds of environments really lend themselves for you to be your authentic self. The Vespers obviously helped, and and I'd never heard of them either. So I think it was kind of a really interesting way to work, sort of very unplanned, with people that I would typically consider to be work colleagues. So it was really nice to have that kind of environment to be able to get to know you and to get to know other people.
I think that's something that we've been missing in the workplace, especially since COVID, is that kind of spontaneous connection. And I think that's why it was especially nice as well, because it's something that we've been missing out on.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think we all value the idea of being in person so much more, obviously, since the pandemic, but also recognizing that it requires us to make more effort and to be more engaged in this kind of environment where we want to still maintain connection, but a lot of it is now remote still. I work remotely. I'm in my happy place up in the Catskills, And the idea of giving that up to be in person every day would be a hard shift. But there's a value in both, right? There's a value in being in person with people and really getting to know people. And there's also a value in people who work well remotely, who need that focus time, who need to be centered in the work that they're trying to accomplish at that time. So I think having the balance of both is really helpful, especially for people like me who find it hard to focus.
Me too. Yeah, yeah. Working remotely was definitely helpful to me. One thing that I really, really appreciated about working with you is we were going through a time of profound transition. And even before the elections and the change in administration, which brought about even more change for the organization, we were already in a time of presidential transition. And I think that what you brought onto the executive team was this sense of calm. You had been through this over and over and over again. I think it was difficult for the people who were so close to the organization and the mission to detach,
Mhm.
literally like have a sense of
Mhm.
detachment from what was going on and how what the end result would be. When you've been through this so many times, it was this just this sense of foresight and calm. Can you talk a little bit about that role that I think you've played over and over again for organizations, and how, just from the outside looking in, reflecting upon how those of us who are really attached to the outcome in the work setting, how that can help and hinder the entire
Yeah.
process?
Yeah, it's a really good observation. I think there's an uncoupling that happens when you're in an interim role where you're fully invested in the outcome of the client, but it's not your outcome, right? You can fight for some kind of outcome as hard as you want, but you're not going to own it at the end of the day. So it must be about what the client needs. And then when you're in it with work colleagues, especially as you said, while we were working through such profound transformation for this particular organization, there's an uncoupling that you can help your colleagues sort of lean into or think into, because the decision making at that time is so unique and so specific. So I think a lot of people, when I'm in an interim role, especially when there's a lot of transformation for the staff, there's a there's a coaching that you can work through that helps people uncouple the decision making from the action. Your work is really valuable. The way that you see the organization and that you're invested in the organization is really valuable. But at this moment in time, this kind of decision making is going to result in X. And it may not be the same result that you would typically make if you're in a regular situation. So helping your work colleagues, helping the leadership, helping decision makers work through that moment in time to recognize that these are unique decisions to be made is it's a tricky position to be in, because so many people are invested in the outcomes for the organization. And my role walking in as this stranger, sort of, you know, making all these sort of statements about what you can and can't do, it's a bridge, right? You have to make a bridge between where people are now and how people are feeling about where they are now, and working towards the outcome of the organization and what does it actually need, and then helping people sort of walk through that process and walk across that bridge ultimately.
And so, for you personally, what role does intuition play when you're helping advise an organization through transition?
So for me, I use my intuition quite a lot. I think in the workplace you don't usually call it that. I mean, I'm sort of thinking back to all the times when I've sort of worked through what I would consider my gut instinct or my intuition or my ability to be perceptive about a certain situation, and I've actually made some pretty significant decisions based on that. And working with leadership to understand how they manage that too is kind of a really important part of the role. So the idea that especially new leaders who are working through an organization, perhaps as a new CEO for the first time, it's really important to help, again, uncouple that moment between decision making for the organization and your perception or your interpretation or your intuition for decision making. And once you can spend time honing that and really working through that, it helps you make much more informed decisions, and it helps you make decisions that you know are grounded or centered in a core understanding of what you know you need to accomplish, either as a leader or as a person sat in a particular chair working through a particular project. But I've noticed that in the workplace, we use the word intuition less and we call it something else, but we're still doing it, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I've been told a lot through my career that I have good judgment, or I'm very perceptive, or I always seem to ask the right questions at the right time, or always seem to find the right candidates, and all of those very nice things to say. But ultimately, they're all centered around how do I feel about this particular situation? And am I reading it well? And
Mm-hmm.
starting to learn that and hone your ability to trust your instincts and your intuition.
And so much I think of intuition is pattern recognition. And so, since you've been through this so many times, I think you've most likely seen patterns emerge, and that allows you to advise people based off of that. But I can also see, and I think we both experienced in this situation too with this organization, that when there is a lot of transition, I think that there's a lot of fear. There's a
Yeah.
fear for the loss of the mission. There's the fear for your own personal security, confronting the possibility of cuts. How do you advise people to differentiate between intuition and fear?
That's a great question. To sort of back up a little bit to the first point that you made, I think recognizing the patterns are really important. And as you said, because I've done it a few times before, part of my role as an interim is being parachuted in, and there's a moment in time when you don't know what's happening in the organization, right? From what's happening at board level and leadership level, what's happening at management level, and then what's happening at staff level. Not all of that is a well-oiled machine. So some people may feel that they get information too early, too late, whatever that is. So my role is to understand that pattern at that moment. So an organization, as you know, goes from startup through to maturity, through to sort of plateau, and then it goes back around, right? Either becomes obsolete, obviously Kodak being the sort of the biggest sort of poster child for that, or it goes back and reinvents itself and then starts on that trajectory again from startup to maturity. And so when I come into an organization, I have to see where the organization is at that moment and then help staff see that too. So I think, as you mentioned earlier, sort of the ability to be calm and to help stabilize a situation that's very may feel very chaotic or very unknown, and obviously that leads to anxiety. The ability to talk with staff about where are we in this process, I think is kind of helpful to be able to stabilize at least at that moment. We're here, there are decisions made, there are decisions to be made. We're in this moment in time. Helps people feel grounded in where they are, and then differentiating between that anxiety versus fear. So for some transformations, obviously they're positive, right? You're going through a growth, you're going through a scaling process, and some, as we talked about, are not going through that, going through a downsizing or going through some other kind of restructure. And so that moment in time, being able to recognize it for what it is and then talk it through with staff is super helpful for them. And as I said, they might not like the outcome entirely, but I think people knowing where they are helps them make better decisions. And it also helps them sort of think into what's in it for me, what's next for me. Is this anxiety or is this excitement?
Mm,
Because with some transformation and with all restructures, there's a level of anxiety, but there's also a level of opportunity. And where do I sit in that moment in time as a member of staff?
hmm In advising people about how to listen to their intuition, so much of it is listening to your body and feeling those gut feelings. And in reality, anxiety and excitement feel the same exact way
Yeah,
in your body. And
yeah,
so it's really the way that you frame it. And going through the transition that we went through with this organization, it was so interesting to me to see how different people were framing I think we were all feeling the same thing, but
Right.
people had different ways to explain that to themselves and to frame it. And
Hmm.
then that would influence their decision making and
Hmm.
whether they were coming from that place of seeing opportunity or being fearful or sitting with that anxiety too much. Let's get into how you personally live your own life. What role has intuition played in getting you to where you are in your career at this point?
Well, everything. um, yeah, wow, that's such a great question. Yeah, kind of everything. I think early phase, right, when you've just gone through, you know, 20s, 30s, that kind of moment in time, there's there's an anxiety and a level of excitement, right? Everything's in front of you. What do you do with it? And are you opportunistic and figure out, what's in front of me and it's a candy store and let me pick something and see where it leads. So I had a little bit of that going on. I also had a real drive to own my own business. So I owned and ran a couple of businesses in my 20s. And so a lot of that was very opportunistic, but all of that was helping me hone how I feel about particular decisions at that time. So I also started work early. I actually didn't go to college till I was in my late 20s. So I started work at 16. So by the time I'd got to launch my own business, 22, 23, I'd already been working quite a long time.
Mhm.
So I feel pretty lucky in that I've been able to really hone my skills at work and then hone my skills as a growing young adult through all of these really serious decisions to be made as a teenager in the workplace and then as a 20 something owning a business and hiring people and getting clients and doing all the things. It was super important for me to be able to know myself, read my own self, read my own opportunities and challenges that I still needed to work on, and then also understand working with clients. What did they really need? Every client has always said, I want to work with X, Y, and Z. And then when you get to know the scope of your work, you realize they really need these things too, right? So it's understanding how to differentiate between what somebody wants and what someone needs, and then helping navigate that with them. And a lot of that for me is especially in that early phase, was intuition based. I was in my 20s, I knew nothing. So I was learning as I was going. Then obviously going through college and then moving from college straight into the nonprofit space. All of that again was all tuition based. I just knew I had to work in the nonprofit space. I couldn't work in the for profit space. And all of that was around being centered around people who wanted to serve their communities, right? So all of that decision making that set me on this path was all intuition, was all based on how I felt about a particular situation at the time.
Is there a time when you listened to your intuition and you had poor results?
Oh yeah. Yeah. There's times when I have when my intuition has told me, I'm thinking of two particular moments in time simultaneously. In both situations, my intuition told me that there were lots of red flags, I guess you'd call them. There were lots of moments to say, let's take a beat and think about if we really want to do this. And in both situations, it's interesting to sort of now project that elsewhere, right, onto somebody that I might be coaching. If you know that you have that kind of moment in time when your intuition is telling you there's a red flag, I didn't take a beat, right? And I would imagine that that happens to other people. There's a need or a some kind of motivation that keeps you moving forward past that intuition or past that red flag. And I've done that twice in my career, and I deeply regret both of them. So I've learnt through the good and the bad to really trust my instincts and trust my immediate reaction to something, recognizing that if you're in an interview or if you're in a meeting and what you're hearing doesn't feel right to you, it might be right for that person, but it's not right for you. You know, do you really have to go along with it? Do you really have to make the decision to stick with the particular decision making at the time if it doesn't sit well with you? It may be okay to do that, right? You might not be the primary decision maker. You might not have all the facts. There may be reasons to sit with it a little bit longer and understand what was the rationale or what was the reason to make a particular decision. But if you're the ultimate decision maker, if it's about your career, your next step, your next outcome, then take a beat, right? Really understand, is it, as you just said, is it anxiety, fear? What is it about this particular moment in time that I'm having a response to it? Is it anxiety? Can I not see the outcome? And then maybe take a beat and think about that. Is it anxiety because it's excitement? You can see the outcome. Then you got this, go for it. You know, so there's trying to have that level of self-awareness to make good decisions for yourself at the same time as understanding that you're in a bigger part of the decision-making process sometimes.
As people are interviewing for jobs, so much of the time, and I've been in this position where, you feel like you need to be completely deferential to the person that you're interviewing with, and you don't feel like you're in a position of power, especially like early on in my career. I definitely felt that way that, of course, you're told to ask questions. And so you think of like the generic questions, but you're not really, or at least I wasn't necessarily considering the position in terms of what I needed. I just needed a job. And so that was the
Yeah.
framing that I went into an interview with. What kind of advice do you have for people who are in that position where they're job seeking and they're going into interviews? How do you ask the right questions to get the information that you need to really sense if there are red flags or green flags and to know if this position is really for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've been asked this a lot. I think there's a couple of different ways that I think about it. One is when I hear of a role that hasn't gone well, my immediate thought is always someone didn't ask enough questions. And so for me, that centers me back to, am I asking enough questions? Am I asking the right questions? So if you're in an interview, as you said, there's a power dynamic there. It may just be with the hiring manager, it may be with the recruiter who's screening you, but there's always a power dynamic there. So how can you feel like you're in control of the outcomes that you want, while recognizing that you're in a line of competition. There may be 7 other people by the side of you who are also interviewing for the same position. So how do you split those things out again, uncouple those things to recognize what's the current landscape? Am I in this role because I love it, because I love the idea of it, because I've met people that I really want to work with there? What's your core? What's your benchmark? What are you thinking about that will make you happy in this job? And then that somewhat uncouples you from the other 7 people who are sat beside you, like interviewing for this position as well, right? Because their motivations are going to be very different and you can't compare yourself to those. So just compare yourself to what you need from this particular role at this moment, and then start to question around that. If you need the right location, do you need to have remote work? Do you need to have certain hours through the week? Do you need to have a certain way of working, in an open plan office, in a closed office? Is there a way to be asked to be able to ask those questions in a way that help you understand the role that you're walking into? And you could frame it literally like that. Help me understand what I'm going to be, what sort of environment I'm going to be in when I'm in day one. Can you help me understand what will my everyday look like? Can you help me understand the collaboration of the team around me? Will I be working across all of the functions, across all of the departments? Will I be working with just a small group? Will they be global? Will they be remote? Ask the questions that you know will help you understand what it will feel like to be in that role. And that will also demonstrate to the recruiter or to the hiring manager that you're really interested in understanding what it will look like to be in the everyday. I think part of what candidates, especially early phase, like early career candidates, part of the anxiety that they feel is that they always feel like they're trying to sell themselves because they need the job. or because there's lots of other applicants. It's still a two-way street. You have to be as happy there as they are with you being there. So asking the questions that will help you know how you'll feel in the role is valid and it's important, and you should spend time on it. Don't just assume that you have to keep selling yourself and saying yes to everything they ask for. So it is a two-way street, and your happiness in the role will be borne out by the kind of questions you ask in the interview, and it will help you recognize whether you'll be there for 6 months or 6 years.
And what about on the flip side, as a hiring manager? I can admit that I use my intuition a lot when I'm hiring, when I've been in that seat. And I've had really good results, a few not so good results, but for the most part, I think that I've hired really wonderful people. I'm a little bit biased, but um, but gosh, even when I'm looking at resumes, there's no logical checklist that I'm going down. I read and I get a feel, and I've actually gone back and looked at the resumes of people that I've hired who have been really successful employees, and I look back at the resume and I'm like, oh wow, this resume really needs a lot of work. And even though it wasn't a super polished resume, as a hiring manager, I saw something there that wasn't logical. Can you talk a little bit about, on the hiring side, how we can hone those abilities to kind of see a candidate holistically rather than in this kind of logical checklist way?
That's fascinating. I'd love to hear how you've gone back and done that. Yes, I think looking at somebody's resume is always so difficult. Hiring managers have hundreds of resumes to walk through every day. And so I think candidates are already starting off on the back foot, right? Because they recognize that hiring managers have got hundreds of resumes to look at. They recognize that it usually has to follow a certain format. I've got my little, my summary here and my laundry list here, and it has to look a particular way. And then how do you stand out? And all of these different, especially now, there's so much information on how to make your resume stand out that you could end up throwing the kitchen sink at it, and then a hiring manager wouldn't look at it just because there's just too much there. So as a hiring manager, when I'm looking at a resume, I kind of want to see less, in the sense that, does this person know who they are? Is their summary this long, or is it this long? And is it succinct? Is it written in a way that helps recognize that they know themselves, they know their core skills? And the two big things that I look for in the summary is, essentially, if it's a technical role, for example, a project manager or something, is number one, are my technical abilities there? If a technical hiring manager was reading that resume, would they see in the first couple of sentences that technically this person was qualified? Because then the rest of it is just, and how were they qualified? And the second piece is, what are my interpersonal skills? Am I collaborative? Whatever it is that you know that you need to be able to talk about for yourself in terms of the role that you play. So to sort of put that more succinctly, it's two things, right? One is role and one is function. The functional role, I'm a COO, therefore I'm a Swiss Army knife of these things. And my role is, I'm an internal coach. I talk with everybody to make sure that they understand where we are in a particular moment in time. So there's two different things that you can put into your summary that help the reader, A, recognize that you can see that you know it, you're self-aware enough to know that you have these two roles, and B, what are they? Am I the hub of all information? Do you value the idea that everyone comes to you for information? And are you technically proficient at all of the different packages or software packages that you need to learn? So those two things are usually pretty sort of central when I look first. And then is there a little, as you said, is there a little sort of like non-logical, what I would like call my quirky line? Is there one thing in there that tells me who they are? Right? So I might say I'm a Swiss Army knife. Makes people smile, but it tells people what it is, right? You literally, I can do anything. So it's one of those things that you can kind of see through a resume. And then am I going to keep looking at everything else? A lot of people have had lots of roles and lots of jobs and lots of functions. It can start to look like a bit of a laundry list. Is that really necessary? Do you really want to just surface the things that you've done really well, or just the scope of your work, or what is it that you really want to surface in that resume that's a marketing tool for your next employer? What do you want that to look like? So I actually try and look a little bit for less so that I can really tell that that person knows who they are and what they want.
As somebody applying for jobs right now, so many employers are using AI filters and doing a first cut of resumes based off of what is not the human element, what
Yeah.
is literally a computer looking for those keywords. But do you have a sense of how people can manage that and how that might my instinct is that we're losing that human element by relying too much on those filters and those search engines to look specifically for keywords. Because, like I said, looking back at some of the resumes of people that I've hired, they probably wouldn't have made it through some
Yeah.
kind of AI um, evaluation, but were fantastic colleagues and employees. So, how can people balance this new age that we're in?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I don't want to give a definitive answer right now because I think we're kind of
Yeah,
in it and learning as we go.
yeah,
It feels a little bit like an arms race, right? For every AI bot that's scanning a resume, there's another one that's helping you avoid it. So,
right.
there's a check and a balance there for you to recognize how much do you want to use AI and how much is AI using you, right? In the sense that if you're going through a hiring mechanism, are you getting interviews? Maybe, maybe not. What's in your resume that's preventing you from getting interviews? It may be the AI, but it may just be because you need your resume written in a particular way, right? So it's it's really trying to uncouple the idea of the resume being a marketing tool of the skills that you already have, right? And the skills that you already know you want. So because you're building them into your summary and then being okay with that. There's going to be a moment in time when you're going to find a match where the right employer wants that employee and the match is there because the AI algorithm for a hiring manager is going to be putting those check words in that system. So if you're a match, it's going to find you. So I wouldn't try and be all things to all people. Try and be the best person you can be for the organization you want to work with, right? Because it's then going to find you anyway. So I would say
Hmm.
that, not worry too much about the AI algorithm for a hiring manager. But then on the other side of that, what are you using to be able to get the job? Are you using AI? And therefore, how are you uncoupling getting the perfect cover letter or getting the perfect resume from actually getting the resume and the cover letter that you want for a particular job? So, that side of it, I think, is still evolving. All of us can write better, right? We can always find a way to be able to write better. Do I want to always do that with AI? Maybe, maybe not. What I've used it for is I've asked it to pull out and help me with the bones of an outline for a narrative because sometimes, you're going to miss something. And I then use that to curate my own response. So I'll use it to help me and inform how I'm thinking about something, but I don't use it to craft my cover letter. I want that to come from me because I want them to see who I am.
Hmm.
So, it's a choice for sure, especially because AI can do everything so well right now. Does it still have your voice? Does it still have the way of being able to present you in a way that's a good match for the firm that you're applying for? Ultimately, if you use AI to screen and AI to apply, when you're in the job, are you going to be happy? You need to
Right.
kind of really know that piece first to understand how much effort you want to make,
Hmm.
you know?
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a good point. In my experience, when I've been job searching, there have been times when I've looked at a listing and I'm like, I have no idea what this organization does, but I just had this pull and I applied anyway. And then in that specific instance, was very, very happy and had a really great experience, even though like the listing, I was like, what on earth is this? And how would I actually complete my job function in this kind of
Yeah.
organization. Have you had experiences like that where you're like, I don't really fully understand why I'm doing this, but I'm going to do it anyway, and then it turns out well?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think intuition and the nonprofit space is really well matched. I think there's a moment in time when a lot of nonprofits are obviously so stretched, right? Everyone's wearing so many hats. When there's a job need within a nonprofit, it's not always clear what that person's going to be doing. We just know we need someone. So I kind of get that. If you're further along, you might actually have a professional HR manager in your organization. And then obviously you're halfway there. Some
Not many
nonprofits
do
just
though.
no,
Most don't.
exactly. Exactly. Just,
Yeah.
some nonprofits are kind of like, we need the person to do all the things. And we can't necessarily articulate what they all are. So in those circumstances, I've definitely seen job postings and you sort of read it, and it's very generic, or you kind of like, I'm not really sure. I think they know what they want. So for you as a job seeker, what are you looking for exactly? Are you also in that same sort of scattergun approach? Sure, help yourself, put that application out there and see what happens. It may be a match made in heaven. Or you could really understand what it is they're trying to accomplish, right? Most nonprofits need you to wear multiple hats. We all know that. Do you have all those hats you can bring? Most nonprofits, when they write down a job description, they may be writing the core of their need, but they might not also write all of the things around it that they also need. So
Mm-hmm.
do you know that role well enough that you know, even through reading that they're also going to need these other four things? Is the organization something that you care about deeply? If you didn't have a job description at all and you looked at the mission, would you still apply? Just an open letter. I can see you need lots of things. I'd really love to work with this organization. Let's talk. Right? So then the job description actually becomes a little less important, because what usually happens in those situations is once you're in there, the job description's somewhat irrelevant, right? Invariably, especially when you're in the small nonprofit, the job description is the draw because they need someone to help them with all the things. And then when you get in there and they recognize that you're a Swiss Army knife, they give you all the things, right? And you end up doing so many other things. So there's an opportunity around that sort of matchmaking, if you will. And your intuition is, am I going to be okay going for this kind of a job and ending up with that kind of job,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you need to be okay with that. If you're the sort of person who, well, maybe you wouldn't even look at a job posting like that. If it wasn't structured, and if it wasn't sort of well scoped, and if it wasn't sort of bound in a particular set of activities, would you even go for a role like that? So, if you need that level of comfort to understand that level of structure, but you still really want to work in that organization, maybe outline that in your cover letter. Don't tell
That's
them they're
very
not
good.
structured, but the idea of like, it looks to me like you need this from this role. I
Mm-hmm.
have these skills to be able to match that. And then again, it's
Mm-hmm.
just matchmaking. So there's
Mm-hmm.
always a way to be able to craft it, especially if you really do want to work for that organization, to craft it in a way that says, this is what I have to offer. Because whether you're a consultant or whether you're early phase in your career, you're still offering a suite of services. I can do these 5 things really well. I can do these 5 things pretty well. You're still offering that. And so are you offering it to an organization that you care about deeply? Or are you offering it because you just need a job? Either way, you make your choices as you're going to look for an organization that's not really, sort of well structured in its job posting, because it might not be in a position to be that structured right now. If
Mm-hmm.
you're okay with that, then go for it.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And I love approaching it from a position of power and a position of valuing yourself too. I
Yeah,
think that's definitely something that I haven't done throughout my entire career. And, has been more like, oh, like, what do you need? I could give it to you, instead of like, no, 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 this is what I have to offer. I love that
exactly.
advice. Yeah.
I would say that. I mean, I think earlier in our conversation, I talked about that in terms of early phase career. I think we go through that all the way through our career. Even now in a client meeting, right? I've got 100 years of experience, and I have a certain suite of services to be able to offer a client. Even in those meetings, I'm always kind of like, is it enough? Is it enough? Like, of course it's enough. You are enough. All of us are enough. It's just is what we have to offer what you need right now. And that's the match to be made, right? As
Exactly.
opposed to trying to be pulled in all directions to be all things to all people.
As someone who has worked a lot with various leaders, let's talk a little bit about leadership and how different leaders can either listen to intuition or not listen to intuition, to be authentic or not be authentic. Have you had experiences where you've seen a difference in the way that men who are leaders operate differently than women who are leaders?
Interesting. I mean, the nonprofit space, in my experience, is predominantly women. So it's I don't want to set a statement out there that is literally just my experience. I would say perhaps if I was gonna put myself on a limb, that maybe men have a different starting point. So their trajectory from very early, the sort of the construct and the norms of what it is to be male in this world versus what it is to be female in this world, I think have a different starting point. So do men trust their intuition more or less than women? I don't know. But ultimately, I think they're more comfortable as decision makers based on the trajectories that men and women have when they're moving through the workspace. So I don't know if I would say that women trust their instincts or trust their intuition more or less than men. Because I'm in a predominantly female environment, I'm more open and comfortable talking about it. I'm more comfortable in a leadership meeting saying, my gut tells me we should be thinking about this. Or even, as I said, I think I said in the earlier in our conversation, I don't use the word intuition much in the workplace, but I think I would be comfortable saying, my intuition tells me that maybe path A might be an option to look at. Right. So I think I would use it differently given that I'm a female in a predominantly female environment. I've never, saying that now, I've never heard a man saying, I trust my instincts.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think I have either. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's driven me absolutely crazy is I've worked with so many incredibly talented women leaders, and I have heard from so many of them about how they still doubt themselves
Mm.
and how they still have to kind of tell themselves on a regular basis, like, no, I am enough, I am worthy of this. And I just really, really wish we lived in a place where women were confident and accepted how amazing they actually are, and that we can help raise everybody up as well, because um it's tough even in a predominantly woman leadership space like in nonprofits. There's just still a lot of self-doubt.
Mm.
um
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
you what's been your experience of that in your career?
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I do see it a lot, but I don't know if I'm influencing it because I have it. Maybe I'm part of the problem. When I'm thinking through a decision, particularly if it's a tricky one, right? It's sort of going to impact the whole organization. I don't do it without engaging other people.
Mm,
And I trust my intuition. If I was gonna make that decision on my own, I'd be fine with that decision. But I don't do it without engaging everyone around me because they're gonna live with the outcome as much as I am. So does that mean that we doubt ourselves? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe we're just more attuned to the idea that more than one person has to live with the outcome.
mm,
So we're very used to being in an environment where the the sense of the whole is more important to us than the sense of the self. And maybe that plays out in leadership, right? We recognize that our immediate peers, our board, our staff, the trajectory of the organization, all of those things are depending on our ability to make a good decision. And so some of them are huge, right? The idea of scaling, downsizing, opening, closing an office, like they're big decisions to be made that are going to impact many staff for many years beyond my situation, right? After I've long gone, someone else is going to be living that decision. So I don't want to make a decision without engaging other people. Is that a male thing or a female thing? I don't know. Is that an intuition thing? I don't know. But it feels to me like women are much more attuned to doing that. And so does that mean that we doubt ourselves or that we want other input to be able to help validate or help make that decision? Does it matter if it's one or the other? I'm not sure.
No, I don't think so.
I don't know.
And yeah, I don't think that it's necessarily doubt. The pull to be collaborative doesn't mean that you are doubting yourself. And I think that really good leaders are really collaborative. I think that really good leader might have a sense of what the end product is, but
Yeah.
knows how to bring people along with them in a
Yeah.
way that that has that buy-in. And that's one other
Mm.
observation I've had in nonprofits, specifically, is there is a lot of collaborative work, which is great. However, people are also reluctant to be the final decision maker.
Oh,
And that slows things down. And, you know, if there was more of a balance, and if people, you know, and maybe this is the case not just in nonprofits, that's just my frame of reference, but it it's sometimes a slow process that can hinder the
mm,
progress of the organization.
yeah, that is a good point. I think I was just trying to chew over how would I know the difference. I think if I'm in the process of making a serious decision, an organizational decision, I engage as broadly as possible. If I know I can sleep well on that decision, then I'm not going to second guess myself. If I lose sleep over that decision, there's something I've missed, or there's some
Mhm.
niggling intuition, there's some moment there that I need to go over before I can call it a decision. So I
Mhm.
think that, so I'm not calling the doubt or the self reflection a negative thing. For me personally, when I'm making a significant decision, I need to feel like I've covered all my bases.
Mhm.
So that idea of like taking a little bit more time over it,
Yeah.
bringing along some of the naysayers is a big part of my role. Like change management is a real is a real requirement when you're going through transformational change. Everybody comes along at a different pace, and you have to bring everybody with you. If I can sleep well, then I know that decision is the right one. And if I can't, I know I've got to chew it over a little bit more with some other people.
So let's talk a little bit about outside of your career. I know that you love to ski, and you're also a ski instructor.
Yeah.
What does your life look like there? And these are places that I know bring you a great amount of joy. Is the way that you listen to your intuition in those spaces different than your traditional career path as a recruiter and consultant?
I think I'm thinking this through for the first time in my life. This is a really great question. Um, I think they're the same. I feel like I want to say that they're the same. I guess ultimately, when you're essentially leading people on snow, right? You're the instructor, so you're supposed to have all the answers. And as a leader, we all know we don't have all the answers. So I would say on snow or in the office, probably it's the same thing, right? If I've got a client on snow versus I've got a client in the office, I would say the two big things they really need to feel is safety and trust, right? So even in the organization that we just worked in together, but in any other client organization, they need to feel safe in the sense that I'm a stable pair of hands. I've been through this process many times. I can predict this path or this path. I might recommend this path or this path. But it's your decision whether to take that decision ultimately. And then my job is really to tell you the implications of that decision. And then on snow, safety is the same thing. You can go down that run as much as you like. I recommend we do this run. And here's why, because the implication will be fear or anxiety. So the idea of the safety, for me, I'm using that word very broadly, because when people don't feel safe, whether it's on snow or in the office, they shut down. They can't learn, they can't perform. So it works both ways, whether you're on snow or whether you're in the office, that safety is kind of key. And I'm at the center of that because I'm the central figure and the reason for them to be in that spot, right? The reason for them to be in that situation. And then the other one is trust, in the sense that they need to trust that I've done this a few times before. Whether you're on snow or in the office, well, Deborah's been through this already and she's telling me it's going to be okay. Or she's telling me it will be okay if we go here. Or it's telling me it's going to be okay if we do this. So that idea of building trust, I think as an interim, it happens much more quickly because your bio kind of precedes you. You know, in the organization where we worked, I'd been through that same situation maybe 11 times, 12 times already. So it was easy for me to be able to see when I'm parachuted in, where we are, what the options will be, where it might land us, etc., etc. And so you automatically have that trust to recognize that I'm not the answer to everything, and I'm also don't have the answers to everything, but I've seen enough of them to be able to give you some predictions. And the same on snow. You know, I've not been an Olympic gold medalist, but I can tell you if you take this at 90 miles an hour, it's going to end badly. So, you know, the correlations are certainly there around safety and trust, because you're the central character who's going to help that person, no matter who they are, get to the other side of whatever it is that they're challenged by, you know. But I do love to be on snow. I like to be in the cool, in the snow.
When you're skiing, is that a time when you're in kind of a meditative state, and is that time that you use to process things that happen in the workplace or elsewhere? What is skiing to you?
It's complete uncoupling. So I've recognized that in our conversation, I've used that word a lot. Yes, it's a way to uncouple. So when you are on the mountain, you can't think about work. So it's like any other technical sport, whether it's like rock climbing or martial arts or motorcycle racing or any particular technical sport that needs a lot of focus to accomplish something that has, you know, consequences. You're completely focused on that activity. So if I have $10 of attention, $8 of it is, you know, what am I doing as I'm going down this run? And the other $2 are what's happening around me. And yet when you're in the office, you know, you can put all your $10 on this particular project, if you know you have to accomplish a particular thing on a certain day. So yeah, for me, it's uncoupling completely. I can't think about work while I'm skiing. So
That is very nice.
absolutely. Which is why I love my winters. So yeah, so I work with my clients during the week, and then at the weekend I coach. So yeah, so those 2 days every week for 4 months, I'm fully focused elsewhere.
Ah, that's
Love it.
amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go back for a second to talk about authenticity. That moment where we had a really authentic conversation and it was so appreciated. People, for the most part, in the workplace have walls and boundaries between who they actually are as a person and who they are in the workplace. What's been your experience working with leaders who have really firm boundaries and leaders that are a little bit more fluid? I would put myself in the latter category. I definitely am fully myself with the people that I work with, and maybe I'm a little too open sometimes, but I think that people appreciate knowing people as a real human being and seeing that authenticity. But then there are other leaders that I've worked with, and I know nothing about their personal life whatsoever. Yeah, can
Mm.
you talk a little bit about how people navigate that in different ways?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting. I'm not quite sure what parameters we're all putting on ourselves, right? You just said sometimes you might be a little bit too open, but compared to what? Compared to that particular boss, or compared to your environment, or compared to that particular job? I think it's somewhat depends, and I hate that answer when people say, "Well, it depends." In the workplace, your culture comes from the top down, right? So, and then staff morale comes from the bottom up. So, if you're
Mm.
thinking about culture, what kind of environment do you want to build for your organization, and do that intentionally? If you're a board looking for an executive director, think about that, right? Because whoever you put in that top spot is going to impact the culture of the organization around it, is going to build around it. So if you've hired somebody that's likes to keep their work and their personal life uncoupled, that's going to sort of generate that kind of environment. So there's going to be anomalies. Obviously, every organization is slightly different, but if you end up with a leader who is very sort of open and wants everyone to feel comfortable and relaxed and authentic in their workplace, then that's the kind of work environment that you're going to end up with, right? And that hopefully permeates out and in, right? And what I mean when I say that is, if you have one kind of work culture or one kind of environment, you're going to hire for it, right? You're going to see it through the job postings. So you're going to see if the job posting is very buttoned up, or if it's very specific, the scope is very specific, the parameters are very specific, the way that you engage with your peers or your board or whatever is going to be very specific. And then you're going to have a job posting that is very relaxed, right? Everyone's seen the ones that says no jerks here. Like, you couldn't get more relaxed than a statement like that in a job posting. But that's going to draw a certain kind of person to that job, and it's going to draw a certain kind of person to that job. So there's a little bit of self-selection going in there when you look at the job posting. When you look at the job posting that's very open because the nonprofit doesn't really know what it needs, it's also going to self-select into that, right? If you're okay with ambiguity, you're going to go for that job. So that's somewhat a self-selection. And then when you're in the role, as I said, the staff morale, it comes from the bottom up. When you look at the leadership from the top down and you think about work culture, what are you seeing? Do they do what they say they'll do? Or do they say something and do something differently? That's going to impact your staff morale, right? That's going to start to influence how people talk about their organization. It's going to start to influence how people talk about their function and their role within that organization. But when you're outside looking in, it's going to be determined somewhat by the way that the job posting is written. So you're self-selecting or out. Does that make
Mhm.
sense?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Definitely. What's next for you? What are you excited about? And are you really busy with all of the transitions going on in the world right now? I can imagine
Yeah, my
there
world
are
is
a lot
upside
of
down.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, seeking
yeah,
people who have the expertise that you have, because there are so many organizations
yeah,
uh, transitioning and trying to figure out what's next themselves, and figuring
yeah,
out what this world is going to be in the next 6 months, year, 2 years.
yeah. It's interesting. There's a lot more recruitment out there at the moment. So, spending a lot of my time with in the recruitment space. So, interviewing what is lovingly called talent, people who are looking for roles, and then working with clients who are looking to restructure. So you may be recruiting for skills that you don't have in place at the moment. So there's a lot of recruitment in that sort of that space. And I'm also, yeah, talking with a lot of people who are looking for roles right now. And then, it's May, but I'm always thinking about the ski season.
Do
So
you do you go somewhere in the summertime, or when there's no snow there in the Catskills to get your skiing in?
Yeah, I mean we've thought about how we can extend our ski season. Our ski season up in the Catskills ends around March. And because my work is remote, we can be anywhere. So we've extended our ski season a little bit to other places a little bit further north. And there's indoor places. This week we're actually going down to a place in New Jersey to practice indoor. But then by July, we'll be seriously thinking about what ski we're going to be doing through the rest of the ski season. So there's only a few months spare between ending one ski season and starting a new one. We're always thinking about it.
So it's right around the corner.
Always, always. When everybody else is saying it's so nice that it's getting so hot, I'm the only one that's thinking about skiing. So,
Yeah, I am definitely on the opposite end of the climate spectrum. It's been so cold here this week in Virginia. I can't wait to get back to Costa Rica where I'm sweating all the time.
yeah, good for you. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to share?
This has been a great conversation. It's been really interesting to think about not just my career, but other people within the context of what does it mean to work with your intuition and recognize that it's something that can be honed, right? It's something that you can really think into and see how it benefits you when you're looking for a new career change or when you're looking to hire people. I think from my space as a recruiter and also as an interim, it's just been a really interesting conversation for me to kind of realize how much I use it and how much is important to me. I didn't realize until we'd talked about it how very important intuition is to my work. So thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Goddess in Training. I hope something in this episode stirred your knowing or softened your heart. If it spoke to you, share it with someone who needs it, or leave a review or comment to help others find us. If you're watching on YouTube, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more conversations like this, please consider supporting Goddess in Training on Patreon. For more tools and offerings to deepen your intuition practice, visit goddessintraining.online. You can also join the Scroll of Seshat on Substack for twice-weekly stories of how I followed my intuition. The music for Goddess in Training is Madre Ayahuasca by Arkawa, and you can find more of his music in the link to his website in the show notes. Remember, your intuition is not a mystery, it's a memory. Keep listening.
Resplandor del fuego, estrellita, tabaco santo, fuerza de rapel, soplo de luz, soplo encantado, viajecito, bendición del cielo, fortaleza.